Committee Room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29. Sound.
Okay, good morning, members, and to Fáilte Roh, if I like. Everyone, welcome to this morning's meeting of the Committee for Communities. We do have quorum, and I call the meeting to order. Can I remind anyone in the public gallery that mobile phones must be turned off? Mobile tablet devices can, however, be used through a Wi-Fi connection, and all devices should be muted. Password details are available in the gallery for anyone wanting to connect to the Assembly's Wi-Fi network, and no recordings or photographs may be taken. Can I also remind members about the protocols regarding the use of electronic devices? Please switch all mobile devices to airplane mode and activate Wi-Fi connection. Please also use tablet devices discreetly and in a way which does not interfere with proceedings, and be aware of the cameras when using your tablet device. And I would remind members about the sensitivity of the microphones. Finally, I would remind members of your responsibility to declare any interest in any of the items under discussion today. Does any member have any interest they wish to declare in relation to today's agenda items? No, thank you, members. So apologies then. Clerk, can you advise us, please?
Kelly Armstrong.
Okay, thank you. Members aware of any other apologies? No? No, thank you. Okay. So members then, in terms of Chair's business, I need to run through a few housekeeping matters today, as this is our last meeting ahead of summer recess. So, in relation to freedom of information requests which may come in during summer recess, it is standard practice to delegate authority to the chairperson and deputy chairperson during periods of recess to submit views on the releasing or withholding of information in any non-routine or contentious freedom of information requests received by the committee, brought to the attention of the committee at the first meeting after summer recess. Do members agree on that basis to delegate authority to the chairperson and deputy chairperson to submit views on the releasing or withholding information in any non-routine or contentious freedom of information request received by the committee? Are members content? Yeah, thank you. In terms of correspondence then, members, the committee team will continue to receive correspondence from stakeholders over the summer period. It is standard practice that the team includes these items for consideration at the committee's first meeting of the new session in September 2024. However, it is up to each committee whether they wish to agree any urgent matters via correspondence. If this is the case, it should be included in the minutes of the next formal meeting of the committee once the Assembly resumes in the autumn. So are members content that any urgent matters are dealt with via correspondence? Content, thank you. And are members also content that we consider all non-urgent correspondence received throughout the summer recess at our first meeting back in September?
Agreed.
Thank you, members. The forward work programme then, members, just to advise you that the forward work programme will be revisited after summer recess, and the clerk will provide an outline, strategic plan and draft priorities for review and agreement based on the exercise which committee undertook during its planning session last month in First Steps Women's Centre. So that's for advice, members. Then in terms of minutes of proceedings, the minutes of this meeting will be signed off as usual at our next formal meeting of the committee in September. In terms then of end of session reports, members, historically at the end of each session in a mandate, each committee produced an end of session report. This was published on the committee pages of the Assembly website and provided a single source of information on the activities and achievements of each committee. However, given that this session has been very short, the Chairperson's Liaison Group has agreed that end of session reports are not required for the February to July 24 season. So committees are next due to produce end of session reports in September 2025. And members then, a reminder in terms of final item of Chair's business, a reminder that this is a very short meeting today to deal with a few routine items before the event with the deaf community, which begins at 11:30 a.m. in the Long Gallery. I would encourage as many of you to attend as possible, as we will have, we believe, over 70 members of the deaf community in attendance, as well as the Minister and other speakers. So thank you for that, members, and look forward to seeing you there. Agenda item 3 then, members, is the draft minutes. I refer you to those minutes from the meeting of 20th of June, and those are at page 6 of the meeting pack. Are members content to agree the minutes of 20th June 2024 as drafted?
Agreed. Yeah.
Thank you, members. Moving on then, members, to item 4, matters arising. So at page 14 there's a ministerial reply to committee queries on whether work is ongoing on a publicly owned land asset register and whether this can be shared with the Communities Committee. Land and Property Services started work in 2019 to create a central asset register for government assets, known as the Government Land and Property Register. The project is currently in its 5th and final year. A public viewer is available using the link provided in the reply. So do members have any comments, or are they content to note? Brian?
Could we get the actual web address? That link doesn't work because it's in a PDF. So I was having a look earlier. Sure. When I go into the main website, I wasn't sure where that particular viewer is, even if it could be emailed out to us later on.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because it would be very useful if you can, because I'm sure we all have difficulties when trying to ascertain who owns a particular bit of land, an alleyway, a footpath, and whose responsibility.
Very important, yeah, and also important in terms of potentially that community wealth building project. I think it's important to have a solid register of what's available and what's out there and who owns it. So members, content with that? Yeah, thank you. Members, then at page 16 there's a departmental reply to committee queries in relation to the Job Start Scheme 50+. The department has recently learned that the bid, which Paddy Rooney spoke about when he addressed the committee for the pilot, was successful, and the scheme can now be extended to the 50 to 64 age group. 1.865 million has been allocated by the Labour Market Evaluations and Pilots Fund for a test and learn pilot until 31st of March 2025. The pilot will offer up to 25 hours of paid employment at the national living wage for approximately 180 unemployed and economically inactive participants for 6 months. Employers can now register for the scheme up until the 30th of June. An evaluation of the scheme is due to be delivered by June 2025. Do members have any comments in relation to that item? Yes, Ciara?
I suppose first and foremost, I'd like to welcome it. It's excellent. It's disappointing that it's just a pilot and it is quite small numbers, 180. But I think I really, really welcome it. But concerned, obviously, that it hasn't been able to be advertised at this moment in time out. There may be new organisations, given that it's a different cohort from the 16 to 24-year-olds at Job Start. So I would definitely, probably when we come back, to kind of get an update where it's at, where the 180 placements has been found. Is it across the whole of the north and all the constituencies, etc. But look, I understand the circumstances, need to get it up and running quite quickly. It is a pilot, but I'd really like to be kept up to speed where it is and the lessons learned as well, how things are going, given that it's a different cohort of people from the original Job Start, so there'll be different needs that need to be required and met. So.
Yeah.
A half-yearly update or a rolling update? Or?
I suppose I think the half-yearly. I think it'd be good to find out in September exactly where the placements are, how things are going, how equally spread it was across the north. And then obviously there will be the full review anyway in March. So.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Chair. Brian?
Chair, I'm just looking through the letter now. Is the funding... It talks about a pilot until March 2025. It also talks about 3 years funding. But anyway, maybe I can take it up with the department. Just when you said about an evaluation to be delivered by June 2025, if the pilot's only until March 2025, just because I understand there's some uncertainty about Job Start funding in the longer term.
See, this is a new one. Obviously, the
For the
existing
older
Job
age
Start
group,
is 16 to 24. So, and the department have for the past 2 years were very keen to explore the potential of the programme now for over 50s. It's a different cohort of people with different needs. So it's really looking at what additionality would need to happen with the Job Start as well, given the different cohort of people. But it'll be interesting to see how successful it is. It is quite small, 180, but it's good news, I suppose.
It would also be interesting to see how the sector who have expertise in that are being involved, given that I don't think there was a full competition for it. I think it'll be interesting to understand how they're going to ensure that the people with expertise in that bracket are included, are involved in the programme. Okay, members content with that? Yeah, thank you. Members, then at page 19, you've been provided with a departmental reply to our queries on the framework for interpretation, translation and transcription services. The committee had raised queries in relation to the contract for these services following the departmental briefing on the current status of social inclusion strategies. The contract started on 1st of February 2022 and will continue until 31st of January 2026. There's a strong and growing demand for services across all elements of the contract. Each user of the contract is invoiced directly for services provided. The department is therefore only billed for services it uses. So do members have any comments, or are they content to note? And I know in terms of just a comment from myself first, I do think this is an area that needs to be look toward and make sure that those translation services are there. There's so many people in a very diverse community now, particularly in areas like my own in South Tyrone, where there's many different languages. I'm also very conscious that we have the deaf community with us today, and there's a need to ensure that there are those interpretation services and Irish language indeed. But it's I think crucial that people are able to communicate with the state and with government in a way that meets their needs and based on their human right to be heard and to engage on a fair basis. So that is a really key service in that context, in my opinion. Any other comments? Ciara?
I would obviously concur. Just one question, because I know it has been raised with me, is the rate of pay for translators. What is the rate set and how often is it reviewed and updated?
Yep.
Question.
Okay, members content then with that. And then at page 21, there's a departmental reply to committee queries on the ongoing review of grant funding. The committee's concerns regarding the impact of salary freezes and the department's contractual perspective relating to the living wage. The reply states that officials have been supporting the work of the Joint Forum to co-develop a set of funding principles aimed at improving the funding relationship with the sector. Over the past year, officials have been engaging with the sector on future needs to co-develop a new longer-term policy and funding framework. It is anticipated that the outcome of the consultation and next stage plans will be published after the summer recess. When this future support is commissioned, some of which will be through open competition, the department is committing to longer-term 3 to 5 year funding allocations to sustain delivery and support organisations to meet outcomes. Sian, go ahead.
Yeah, just on the back of the Joint Forum work on the fair funding framework, I have been contacted by quite a number of community voluntary organisations who, we're a quarter basically into the financial year, and people are only just getting their letters of offers. They're having to dip into charity, what is the word I'm looking for?
Reserves.
Thank you. To actually sustain. So cash flow is a massive issue in the community voluntary sector at the minute. It's even worse in the arts sector and in those small independent arts organisations. We heard yesterday at the Arts APG, they haven't even received a 3-month budget at all. They're still working on their own and using their own money and cash flow within the organisation to try and bolster that. So I think anything in that fair funding framework, no other sector would have to deal with that, particularly from a department. And then on top of that, the paying of invoices in a very prompt manner from department and from statutory bodies, I think is really crucial at the minute for the community and voluntary sector. But I'm desperately worried about how we are treating both the community and voluntary sector and those organisations within the arts sector. Do not have received a letter of offer and do not have received any kind of financial payment for the first 3 months of the year it's not good enough.
Yeah. The other thing that strikes me about it as well, and I very much welcome multi-annual budgeting, is a key step. However, it's important, I think, also to say it's not a panacea if the level of funding or departmental allocations are not sufficient. Those so they can't be taken lightly in that regard. you know, you need to see the mechanism being effective by having the proper funding basis.
And to have inflationary uplifts when you have a year where you have an increase in staff costs due to rising minimum wage and things like that, and you have the cost of actually running a centre. So to give the same funding as last year is actually a cut, even though the department, I think, has put that out there that this is a positive, that, you know, there's the standstill funding and they're getting the same as last year, but actually it is a real-time cut.
Yeah.
Just to add, and obviously I would agree with Shan, but another thing is probably just raising it and continuing to raise it, is the national living wage as of March.
Mm-hmm.
The community and voluntary sector will be on a cliff edge, and I've been speaking to so many recently and gravely concerned as of the 31st of March. So it's just raising it with the department across all community and voluntary sector funding programmes, that it's a huge issue, and having it raised and having it reviewed and looked at, particularly moving forward into the next financial year as well. It needs to be looked at now, you know. So.
Is the committee going to resolve to write to the department and ask to keep these on the radar, or?
I just do raise it, that we're gravely concerned, the CMV sector is gravely concerned, particularly given...
And make the points that have been raised by members in the letter.
Thank you. Brian?
Yes, I'm in touch with many groups in the voluntary community sector regarding their funding. I've raised the issue about neighbourhood renewal groups in particular a number of times in committee, so at least welcome that the funding now is confirmed up to the end of this financial year, and that there has been a 5% uplift. And I know it hasn't applied to every single group within the voluntary community sector, but for neighbourhood renewal it is a 5% increase on their funding from last year, and that there is actually an increase in the budget for the voluntary and community sector in this financial year. That mightn't extend to every single group, but in a tight budget where it's not been possible to increase every budget, at least there has been some increase there.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, members content? Clerk, are you content with?
Yeah.
So moving on, members, to page 23 of your pack then, there's a departmental reply to committee queries on neighbourhood renewal. During the departmental briefing, officials had agreed to provide additional information in relation to the current maps that provide details of the existing areas of multiple deprivation. This information is provided in the reply. The committee also requested information on the letters of offer process. Work has commenced on providing funding agreements to the neighbourhood renewal groups. Officials are currently working to ensure that all groups have a grant funding agreement for the 2024-25 financial year in place by 30th of June. Members also requested a copy of the research report carried out by Queen's University, and a copy of that report has been provided in the reply. So, members, I do welcome the significance of place in tackling deprivation report by Professor Brenton Morta. It's useful to have that. And to acknowledge that it emphasises that, amongst other things, a far more ambitious place-based economic approach is needed, in which community wealth building offers the framework. So I think that's important context around that. Any other comment, members, in relation to that item? Members, content? Okay, thank you, members. Moving then to so page 125, we're jumping to page 125. There's a departmental reply to committee queries on carers allowance overpayments. The committee was seeking a quarterly update on work with DWP, Department for Work and Pensions, in Westminster to secure access to the verification of earnings and pension system, as well as information on what other actions can be taken by the department to help mitigate carers allowance overpayments while system access is awaited. The department is confirming that it is happy to provide a quarterly update. The first one will be due in September, as recoverable overpayments primarily occur when changes which may impact upon entitlement are not reported promptly. Improving customer awareness about the importance of reporting all changes, not just those relating to earnings, will also be a key factor in the timely identification of overpayments. The department is planning a programme of stakeholder engagement and a review of customer messaging to ensure that all carers allowance recipients are aware of the importance of promptly reporting changes of circumstances. So I welcome that. I think that's an important part. I did say at the time when that story broke that the scale of it and the extent of it would seem to appear that there is a communication issue and that the allowance is hard to navigate or understand. So I think urgent action by the department is welcome in relation to that, and the updates obviously will allow us to keep our finger on the pulse of what's happening with that. And I know the Minister has committed to engaging with carers and to mitigating where possible, where appropriate, to revoking the charges, and he has agreed to do all he can in that respect, so we'll keep an eye on that. Any other comments, members, in relation to that? All okay, and members, go ahead, Ciara.
Just I've had a few constituents in that similar environment, and I suppose when they're getting the phone calls regarding overpayments and kind of agreeing payment plans, they kind of made a payment plan a few weeks ago and then they realised. So I would just be interested in finding out as in relation to an agreement as to what needs to be paid back, what's the process for that, and is it just done over the phone, or is there more kind of detailed analysis and stuff? Because I'm currently, you can go on online now and actually write back in again on behalf of constituents for them to review the level of payment. So it's just an area, there may not be, but a few that I've had to go on online now and write back in, because these people can't afford the monthly repayment, and it's solely to do with being on universal credit and also getting a care allowance, and they say this happens every year with them. So I do welcome obviously the improvements with regards to communication, but just that overall element of the agreement that is, and how flexible they are in that, and maybe how it's done.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the process for setting up the repayment
The
plan,
repayment
and
plan.
the level?
Yeah.
Okay.
And how are the department ensuring that that what the person is doing is affordable and manageable? Members, thank you. Members, so moving on then to agenda item 5, which is enforcement bill. So members, we need to agree several things in relation to the bill. The first of these is a draft motion to extend committee stage, which is at page 128. Are members content that this motion is lodged with the Business Office?
Yeah.
Content, thank you. At page 129 then, there's a draft bill timetable. Are members content to agree the timetable as drafted? Thank you. At page 131, there are draft questions for the citizen space. Call for evidence on the bill. Are members content to agree the draft questions in relation to the bill?
Can I ask, Chair, where are those consultations? Where are they advertised? Because we seem to get them through. Is it just citizen space? But is there any other way of kind of promoting that? I just feel like when we get those through, they seem to be really low numbers, and they're actually not hitting the people that have the experience of the system. And I'm just wondering if there's any way the department has I suppose a more flexible communication plan dependent on what they're actually looking views on.
This is committee's call. This is
Okay.
our call, and committee will own this part of the engagement process. And the next item is to agree an advertisement that goes in the papers. We're traditional in that sense, but we will also boost it out via the existing media platforms that the committee has on behalf of the committee.
So I suppose Sean's query really is, I suppose in my mind, citizen space probably is an appropriate place for it, but it's a matter of raising the awareness for people to go on to citizen space and have their say. I think that's the part of the jigsaw maybe and that's as the clerk points out, our role to try to do that as best we can. So
when Eleanor briefed from RAISE, she had identified a key list of groups that we could target, and once we have that advert out, we will boost it to that target.
That's great, thank you.
and
Confusion there.
And I think it's key that we use our platforms as well, and party colleagues. We try to encourage as many people as possible to spread it as far and wide as possible when it becomes available. So I think that would all help. Thank you for that point, Sean. Okay, at page 133 then, as the clerk mentioned, is a draft signposting advert. Are members content that the advert is placed in the 3 main newspapers? Yep, thanks members. And then members in table papers at page 7 to 13, there's a copy of the Delegated Powers Memorandum for this bill. Can I confirm members are content that we forward a copy to the Examiner of Statutory Rules for her legal advice on the powers contained in the memorandum? Members content? Thank you. Okay, members, moving along to item 6, which is SR 2024/136, the Occupational Pension Schemes, Collective Money Purchase Schemes, Amendment Regulations, NI 2024, and those are contained at page 136. Members, we considered this at SL1 stage at our meeting on the 29th of February when we were content for the Department to proceed to make the rule which we now have before us. So these regulations amend the Occupational Pension Schemes, Collective Money Purchase Schemes, Regulations NI 2024, the 2024 regulations, to clarify that provision governing how reductions to member benefits in collective money purchase schemes can be managed so that it operates as originally intended to mitigate, where appropriate, the impact on members. That the categories of Flexi Access Drawdown Fund to which accrued rights in a collective money purchase scheme that is being wound up can be transferred, and the rule will cease to have effect after 6 months unless approved by the Assembly. So have members any objection to the rule? No? Thank you, members. Can I then ask formally that the Committee for Communities has considered SR 2024/136, the Occupational Pension Schemes, Collective Money Purchase Schemes, Amendment Regulations, NI 2024, and recommends that it is approved by the Assembly. Are members agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you, members. Agenda item 7 then, members, is correspondence, and I refer you to the correspondence memo at page 177 of your meeting packs there, members, and just want to check, do members have any items that they wish to raise? And, well, I suppose just in relation to the individual in defective premises, as with all of these correspondence, we will be forwarding those to the Minister for Communities for his attention. Yeah. Request there from Action for Children to brief the committee, and I think we should agree that. I think that's a big part of the work that we're engaged in, so I think we should arrange for that to be scheduled. Clerk, please, if we can.
Yeah, Action for Children.
And any other comments?
Sorry, just on the Action for Children, I really just want to pay tribute to the work that they've been doing. They're an exceptional organisation in terms of the advocating for children and young people, and the briefings that, I don't know if other members receive them, but as the children and young people spokesperson for my party, the information that they send through is just really, really useful, particularly in the remit that we deal with in this committee. So I would be really, really keen to have them in.
Yeah, I would concur with what I've worked closely with them as well in terms of their work with child carers in particular, and they do really good and really important work there. So that's well noted, and thank you, Sean. The other one, 7.8, I just want to reiterate then, the Commissioner for Older People has provided, has now written to community with that report that I mentioned last week. So I just want to thank the Commissioner for the report. I think this is a fundamentally important issue for us as an Assembly, as an Executive, as a society, that we do get to grips with the changing demographics here and what the impact of that will be in terms of people and in terms of provision of services, and all of that is going to be of huge importance. So I want to thank the Commissioner for that, and maybe also suggest that we write to the Minister to ask what areas he has been advocating for within discussions on the programme for government outcomes, and when we're likely to see a draft of that. Members will be content with that.
Yeah.
And Chair, sorry, I was quite surprised by some of the figures in Eddie's report. I don't think I realised quite the extent of how of what we're facing, I suppose, in terms of an ageing population. Would it be worth getting the Commissioner into the committee? I don't know whether that's... I
think it would, because it fundamentally underpins and kind of provides challenges across all of the areas we're working on. So I certainly would be in agreement if members were.
One of the issues, obviously we have the anti-poverty remit as well, and I think that is a really big concern, is the number of older people who will be living in poverty. So I think it definitely fits in well with the work that we have going on.
And what struck me about it in discussion with them as well was how quickly some of the impacts start. You know, they're stretching over the next 20 years, but a lot of them start quite early on, so it's something we really need to turn our attention to. So I'm content if members are content with that. Yeah, members, I also want to draw your attention then to...
I just come back.
Yep, go ahead. Sure.
And I don't want to do more work on writing letters, but it's about maybe asking not just our Minister of Communities, but maybe getting a letter off to all departments in relation to what consideration they have given, and maybe attaching the report as well. I'm not too sure, and I know obviously the Commissioner has been in with the Department of Health, but I'm not sure it's cross-cutting, whether it's economy regarding work, physical it covers across. So I would be interested to see just what conversations and raising it with all departments regarding the ageing population and the needs, and what consideration has been given with regards to discussions for the next programme for government.
Yeah, because it is clearly going to have an impact on all departments. No question about that. Okay, and members, I also want to draw your attention to correspondence from Disability Action in table papers at pages 15 to 65 in relation to a UN report on the rights of disabled people and an associated request from Disability Action. So are members content that we invite Disability Action to the meeting on the 19th of September to brief us on this issue?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Content, members, thank you. So any other comments on any other pieces of correspondence then, members? No, thank you. Okay. Are members therefore content to action all the other correspondence as outlined in the memo? Thanks, members. Item 8 then, members, is the Forward Work Programme, which you will find in your pack at page 538. Do members have any comments in relation to the Forward Work Programme? I'm conscious we've added a bit to it there already, but so do members have any comments, or are they content to note the Forward Work Programme?
Noted.
Yep, thank you, members.
Could I just make a comment? Obviously, I had agreed that I would maybe liaise with the committee for some date, maybe in September, October, and maybe do host the committee in Derry. So if there's any specific maybe date that the committee would have in mind, she can let me know and I'll get that organised.
Okay.
Okay.
Members content with that, yeah. Okay, thank you. And then agenda 9, members, any other business today, members? No. Well, thank you then, members. So I'll move then to date, time and place of our next meeting. Just before I do that, I'll give a further reminder just to members about the event up now with the deaf community in the Long Gallery, and I'd love to see everyone at that event. Was Morris looking in there?
I'm not sure. There's no hand.
Morris, are you looking? No. Okay, thank you, Morris. So members, our next meeting will be at 10 a.m. on Thursday, 12th of September. 2024 in room 29 here in Parliament Buildings. Thank you, and the meeting is now adjourned, and we'll wait a few moments just to come off the broadcast. Thank you.
Committee Room 29. Sound. Committee Room 29. Sound. Committee Room 29. Sound.